So friends, after knowing a few things of a general nature about Dostoevsky, we are now prepared, in fact, to understand his short stories in a slightly deeper way. And what better thing to keep in mind than, that he is intensely humanistic, and he understands those categories of humanism which generally keep away from the attention of ordinary writers. So I request Professor Bajaj to tell us about his short stories more.
Yes, thank you, Professor Prakash. I just want to open the discussion by noting that characters in Dostoevsky's short stories actually assert their humanity, even in the midst of a crisis. They respond to the problem and try to tackle it. They don't derail or feel helpless in the clutches of the system. Rather, they assert more strongly the need and desire to help one another. And that is what sets them apart. And that is how Dostoevsky needs to be reviewed in a different light, I think now. I've discussed with you earlier An Honest Thief, the story. Take another instance, as far as this kind of feeling of brotherhood or fellow feeling is concerned. It's the story which is titled Peasant Mari. Very simple story. It is in fact an autobiographical account that Dostoevsky talks about. It recounts a memorable incident from his childhood that left a deep impact on him. This story and this Peasant Mari is very interesting, and this also brings me to the question of the narrator or the form of the short story in the hands of Dostoevsky. We find that Dostoevsky is actually very experimental when it comes to the stories. An Honest Thief, the story that I discussed in my previous lecture, was a story within a story. There was a man who was telling the story of a past incident of his life, an old man. In this case, which is an autobiographical one, in fact, this story, The Peasant Mari, was, is an autobiographical account of his time spent in Siberia when he was in prison. So as a political prisoner, Dostoevsky says that in prison, I often would go back to my childhood memories. And then from these, and therefore he says, in this case I'm reminded of this incident of Peasant Mari, who helped me when I felt scared. So just to give you the plot, the story that he recounts, he says, as a boy of 9, I was loitering in the field and I felt frightened because I thought there was a wolf in the vicinity. Now at that time, a peasant named Mari, whom this narrator vaguely remembers now, he came to this boy, that is Dostoevsky, caressed him as a mother, and then walked with him a good distance to see him off. And the narrator says, and I quote, I walked away looking back almost at every 10th step. Mari stood still with his mare as I walked away and looked after me and nodded to me every time I looked around. Right? So this is the peasant that we are talking about, the peasant who stood to caress him as a mother and stayed with him till this boy reached home. So there is a sense of a kind of an unspoken bond which is built between this peasant and this little boy who felt scared in the fields alone. And what is the bond that brought them together, that united them? None, and yet at the level of just humanism. Right? It is this humanism that I was referring to, that the narrator felt intensely scared at that moment, and the peasant affectionately became the protector of this boy. He says, and Peasant Mari at this time says, and I quote, you should be able to see it on your screen. It says, I won't let the wolf get at you, said the peasant to the young boy with a loving smile. So you can see that the peasant has become this protector for the young boy, and this is this warmth, this is this precious bond that is built among strangers and forged for a lifetime, that Dostoevsky remembers as he has grown old and is in prison now, and he remembers this peasant who helped him at one point in time, which is what I meant, that even in terms of crisis, even in times where a Dostoevskian character in a novel would crack apart, right? In the story, this person is able to find sustenance through people whom he has met and who have helped them, or who have helped him. So in a way, there is a sense of a deep humanism that is running throughout these stories in Dostoevsky. And look at this kind of experimentation also of memory. You know, both An Honest Thief and Peasant Mari, they are based on memory. You know, in fact, Dostoevsky, and why, I mean, for a moment I thought, if it's an autobiographical account of Dostoevsky's life, of prison in Siberia, why is it a story and not, why is it a story? Why is it not a part of his autobiography? It is a story because Dostoevsky very clearly in the story himself says that I analyzed the incident and I corrected it. And I kept correcting it.
What does correct mean?
Exactly. It meant editing. So when you are editing your memory or your dream, you know, and there is another story which is called The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. You know, so there is whether it is a dream or it is memory, when it is edited, when it is corrected, when it is analyzed, it automatically becomes a story. Then it ceases to be autobiography. You know, and so I thought that, you know, that the narrator, it's a self-conscious narrator. And I also think that there is a lot of magic in Dostoevsky's story. For instance, you know, there is this The Heavenly Christmas Tree, which is otherwise based on the life of this, you know, this orphan, right, who's a poor orphan, who's running around and in cold and is freezing. He has frost bites. He sees the wealthy people and wealthy kids running around Christmas trees in their homes, dressed in beautiful clothes, and he is cold outside on the street. You know, so there is a kind of a contrast built there. And this person is then knocked over by someone else and he dies. And he finds himself in around Christ's Christmas tree. And he doesn't know where he is, but he seems to be very happy, and he's suddenly warm, and there are lots of children like him who are there. So, you know, this crossover from life to afterlife,
fantasy, nature,
to fantasy, to dream, to Christ's Christmas tree. And the narrator tells you that, I can tell you that the part where the boy was sleeping on a wood stack and was feeling cold is true, but I can't vouch for the section where about the Christ Christmas tree. So the narrator is deliberately building a sort of a magical tale, and that's why I say fantasy, folklore and romantic.
Please say something about the peasant part. It's a peasant.
Right.
So what does he indicate by calling him a peasant?
Peasant Mari, you mean to say?
Yes.
Yes, because he is working in the fields nearby, right? So the fact that he is talking about so Peasant Mari is a different story, and The Heavenly Christmas Tree is a third story. So I just moved from one story to the other. But the Peasant Mari story was about this peasant who helped this little boy of 9 and secured him from feeling you know, scared, that he thought that there was a wolf around him, and he looked after him in that moment, for that brief moment, and was not like, you know, they build a kind of a bond forever, but in that moment they united as, you know, human beings who were there for one another. And in this case there was an adult who was there for the child. So it is building of that kind of a bond, and an ordinary person like the peasant.
That also, you know, attaches the story with what you called romantic earlier.
Yeah, romantic in that sense. You know, this kind. So I think what is important for Dostoevsky is this feeling that you know, originally we've lived in a commune sort of a place, that we've lived as a happy community, and that it is only now that that you know, state has come in, or when we have been divided in different strata, that, or where money has come in, that everything has become spoiled. So I think he seems to build on this idea of innate. In fact, on the contrary, I mean, whatever has been believed of Dostoevsky, I think he actually believes in the innate goodness of people, that people are innately good and helpful.
Innately, naturally,
right, of their own, that there is this kind of beautiful human being that has been corrupted by society, you know. So you could
That
say
also
perhaps
makes him anti-capitalist.
Anti-capitalist. Also maybe to some extent like Rousseau, you know, that society actually has corrupted us and that it's time to go back to nature. And in Dostoevsky's case, going back to nature is to going back to your primitive self. That is, the human being as such is beautiful. In fact, this is very clearly projected in the story The Dream of a Ridiculous Man, where this man slips into a dream and he thinks he's entered another world, and in this another world he finds that everybody is beautiful and they have this amazing life. They are all driven by love for one another, and when he comes in, he starts corrupting them with his ideas. Finally he finds that they have become, they love to lie, they love falsehood because of him, you know. And he says that I have corrupted this beautiful world, another earth. So, you know, do you see what I'm trying to say
Very
here?
interestingly sinister.
Yeah, right. You know, this man actually believes that every, you know, that they were lovely people and they loved their fruits and they were self-sufficient and everything. But then, because of my ideas, and you know, he says that the work they did for food and raiment was brief and not laborious. Right? He says they wandered about their lovely woods and copses, they sang their lovely songs, their fare was light, the fruit of their trees, etc. He goes on to talk about that. So there is a festive radiance in that other world, but then he says that I corrupted them, you know, like a wild trichina. Yes, it ended in my corrupting them all. Like a germ of the plague infecting whole kingdom, so I contaminated all this earth, so happy and sinless before my coming. They
And
learned
see
to
how
lie.
many words, see the rich vocabulary. He is
Right.
using different words for this.
Right, you know, like a germ of the plague.
Yes.
So I have corrupted them with my ideas, you know,
And very
infecting
sharp,
them
very sharp.
like a disease, you know. So infecting whole kingdoms, I contaminated all this earth. They were sinless before my coming. They learned to lie, grew fond of lying, discovered the charm of falsehood.
How sharp the critique of capitalism at that point
Right,
of time.
yes.
It's poison.
Yes.
It's disease.
So, you know, this is what I meant. This is so I think this is the larger approach of Dostoevsky also. That that we have lost our real human self, which was actually beautiful, and therefore I said that, you know, he believes in this kind of humanity that is lost because of civilization. Also, I sometimes feel that probably it is Freud would go on to talk about civilization and its discontent, that civilization is actually taking us away from our real human potential. So I think that's the larger strain of Dostoevsky's work.
And particularly in the case of Rousseau, you know, you have that a man is born natural and simple,
Right.
but then he's corrupted by the world.
Right. I think that's the kind of approach that Dostoevsky is also taking here. But, you know, think of the dream, that a man slips into the dream and enters another world. Think of the magical tales that he's creating and constructing over here. This kind of experimentation that he's doing, almost like, you know, I would say he's a precursor for this kind of magic realism. That became the kind of writing in the 20th century, you know, the big movement. So I think by including magic in his tales, he's able to again convey a lot more, or show the absurdity of life as also. And what could be more absurd, for instance, than this story which is titled The Crocodile and Extraordinary Incident. Now, what could be more absurd than this episode in this story where a man is swallowed by a crocodile, right?
Say something
Whole.
more about it. It's very interesting.
He's swallowed by a crocodile, and to his surprise, he's still alive. And he's not been eaten. He can still breathe. He says it's quite roomy in there, and he tells his friend, in fact, I might call my wife in. You know, there's enough room for the two of us so that we don't get bored. So imagine that kind of humor that is being built.
What does the crocodile stand for, in your opinion?
Yeah. Now, the crocodile, very interestingly, is a metaphor for capitalism.
Okay.
Because this, let me tell you, it's a dark humor in the story, and you know, the events actually appear amusing at first, but then they begin to jolt and disturb the reader. The story verges on the macabre, really speaking, since it concerns the impending death of a man. You know, he can die any minute because he's been swallowed by a reptile, and he's living and he's talking from inside the reptile. Yet that is of least concern to his friends and acquaintances. The story is full of ironies, there's a critique of the cultured people as well. That, there is this cultured bureaucrat, his name is Ivan Matveich, who visits a cultured place, which is an arcade, where there is a European creature who's come from Germany, that is the crocodile, is brought in. When he is swallowed by the crocodile, it's the most barbaric act of the crocodile swallowing a man, a cultured man. So, what Dostoevsky is building in is that there is barbarism at the seat of culture. That there is sheer barbarism in the minds of people, in the attitude of people. What is shocking is, one, this act that a crocodile swallowed a man, a cultured bureaucrat, but what is more shocking is the fact that nobody seems to be thinking about the man at all. They seem to be thinking about the crocodile, which is a foreign capital for them. They say that it's come from Germany, that is foreign capital. Let more people come and watch now the crocodile with the man inside, because that will in fact give impetus to foreign capital. Now other crocodiles from the world will also come to Russia, they will display, and then this will give rise to foreign capitalism, and we should promote foreign capitalism. So imagine this kind of skewed logic that is being promoted.
And the human being is imprisoned in capitalism.
Yeah, and the human being is imprisoned in that metaphor, as you said. The crocodile becomes the metaphor for this kind of foreign capital. Everyone believes that the owner of the capital should be allowed to make more profit at the cost of this man. Nobody seems to think that, there is anything wrong. The crocodile owner has every right to make profit. Now that there is a man inside, he will make more profit. He will charge double to the audience that comes in. There is this skewed logic of protecting foreign capitalists, that is being portrayed through this story. And everybody seems to be applying that logic, even to the extent that even the victim thinks that the crocodile owner is not wrong if he wants to make profit through me. So imagine this kind of a skewed logic. So, the mantra that they all believe in is in profit and the new principles of economics, which call for private property and enhancing profit. In fact, one of the friends of this victim says that he should be a martyr. He should become the martyr for the country. This will excel and accelerate our growth as a foreign capitalist country.
It's a very witty story.
Very witty and very satiric in that sense. Because the narrator, and it is only the narrator who's bewildered by everyone's disregard for human life that is imprisoned in that crocodile, which is capitalism. So I think that the crocodile becomes a metaphor for foreign capital must be used to create a chain of investment from abroad. This kind of a logic is what Dostoevsky is actually hitting at.
Actually, he is presenting a problem for people to consider.
Yeah.
Because this is what is happening in Russia, and the capital is coming from elsewhere.
Right.
But then there is a metaphor, and you are entertained as well as you are compelled to think.
Right. Also, there is this sense of an admiration, this sense of admiration of European capitalism, Western European capitalism. That they are getting ahead and they are doing great things, and we should also bring in that kind of foreign capitalist here. If human beings have to die for it, it doesn't matter. So I think there is this kind of a very absurd sort of logic which is being parceled as normal and accepted, and the only person who is left bewildered by all this is the narrator, who still has some sense of loyalty and some sense of affection for the man who's trapped inside the crocodile.
I was just reminded of Karl Marx at this point of time, who was alive, who would very soon die in 1880 or so, and he was experimenting with different forms of capital in that text which is called The Capital. And this is what is, there is a kind of fetish that is going on, and this person is able to explore that fetish in the form of a short story.
Right.
And they are exact contemporaries.
Yes, exactly. I agree with that he's exploding this fetish of money, of private capital, of profit, because when there is this sense that create a chain of investment from abroad so local business can flourish. At the cost of human life. So you begin, initially it doesn't make sense to you, initially it looks like a humorous tale, right, that a man is swallowed by crocodile. But soon it becomes a very intellectual story, because each person who comes in comes with this sense of an approach, an attitude and a mindset. And this mindset either belongs to those, there are those people who say, oh, you wanted progress, now take progress. This is what happens when you bring in foreign capital into the country. This is what happens to people. So you can see a conservative approach coming in. Then a second person comes in and he says, yes, let this person be a martyr and let him show the way. Let him create a chain of investment in our own country which is going dead, by bringing in more Western capital and giving a kind of impetus to local business. The victim himself says, okay, let the man make profit, ask him to give some money to my wife. So the man who's trapped inside the crocodile, he says, I'm pretty comfortable inside, and I can live here, and I can actually have become more wise, and I've gained a new perspective on life. Let people come in, I will give them new perspective on life, and let my wife also get some money out of this profit that the crocodile owner is making. So the whole logic, the whole affair appears ridiculous.
Layer upon layer of irony.
Irony, exactly.
Yes, yes.
Irony in the sense of culture and barbaric reality, irony in the sense of what has gone wrong with to their minds, and the whole affair appears ridiculous, and also evokes disgust at sometimes. He takes a dig at the intelligentsia of the time, and he's that is either devoted to this blind economic progress or the old conservative way of life. So both are amply critiqued in the story. And obviously the narrator's approach, which is the human rational one, is the one that is foregrounded in this story.
Tell us something about the ridiculous, the word ridiculous that is used in the title of the story.
Right. You see, the story is titled, again, The Ridiculous, I said, because it's a ridiculous dream of a man. And then it actually gets attached to the crocodile story, the Crocodile and Extraordinary Incident, because both of them are about something. The previous story is about this man who's called a ridiculous man. Now, because he is a person who's a good for nothing fellow, and he has no purpose in life, suddenly finds a purpose, so in the eyes of society he's a mad person, and and the writer is again taking a dig, or ironically calling it ridiculous, while he actually, what he means is that it might appear ridiculous, but it is actually important, this desire. So the idea of dream also is very important here, and the character, the ridiculous man, actually says that dream is a reflection of desire, and he says that it is a manifestation of desire. So and therefore I also said romantic in the beginning to qualify these stories, that romantic because they dream. These stories they revolve around dreams, and they revolve around the desire of human beings to build an alternate world for themselves. For instance, this little boy in the heavenly Christmas tree is suddenly transported to Christ's Christmas tree. But then an alternate world is built where he is happy, where he is not an orphan, where there's ample food and he is warm. So, there is this kind of an alternate world that is being built through dreams and through afterlife in this. Or an alternate world which is available only where society has not as yet destroyed people, as in the case of the Peasant Mari, who's able to develop this kind of a very simple bond with this young boy.
Okay, tell us something about all these stories together, as if you are talking about the writer as a writer of short stories or storytelling.
So I think the stories, revolve, some of the main issues that these stories revolve around would be the issue of poverty, unemployment, the insensitivity of the rich sections of society, the competitiveness among the middle class sections of society, their aspirations to be rich and quick, and their admiration for the Western European nations. These are some of the attributes that you see are issues that are discussed there. Alongside, I see a lot of humanism portrayed through ordinary characters in these stories. So I think Dostoevsky, as a short story writer, wants to, wants to end on an optimistic note, which is something that he is not really concerned with in the novel. You know, he doesn't really, he lets these characters go wherever, but he wants a sense of optimism prevailing in the stories, and therefore there is a sense, if there is no respite for this boy, poor orphan in this world, he will find him another world and plant him there, even if it is a dream or if it is a magical afterlife. So I think there is a deep desire in the short story writer to take us towards a sense of optimism and faith in this humanity.
Suppose I ask you that whether he is writing short stories in order to complement them with his novels, which are full of mystery, which are full of pain, which are full of helplessness, suffering. Is that the case?
I think that, you know, characters in his stories don't crack up under a flawed system.
Yes.
You know, instead they unite and they help sustain one another. This is missing in his novels.
Which are split apart at the middle.
The characters take their destiny to their ends, to that end. There is nothing to support them, and the human relations are not enough for them to carry on with their life endeavor. While the short story, I think perhaps because the novel gives him ample scope to delve into the psychology of the character because of space and time, and he can write pages and pages on the psychology of the novel. I think Dostoevsky is unable to come out of it finally. In the story, it is not the character's psychology that is the center, or the mind which is the center. It is the event, it is a moment, it is the episode, the incident, which is important.
The surroundings, the society, the problems there.
The problem, the moment, the plot. It is that which is important, which can be overcome.
Suppose he had not written the short stories, then this aspect would have been uncovered.
Yes, there is, so what happens, there is plot in the novel also, but the plot becomes, steadily you find that the plot becomes secondary to the character. I'd say that in the story, the problematic, the situation, and what it requires from the person, is at the center, and the character exists only as part of the larger scene and is not the entire focus, and which is why the stories have a kind of a have a possibility and a potential to reach a kind of an optimistic end.
That's a good conclusion, and friends, as you have already seen, that Dostoevsky as a writer of short stories stands out in the overall writing that is given as a name, and that unless you read the short stories, you would be overlooking certain important aspects of his sensibility and his sensitivity. So it's a lecture that does that kind of justice to the talent of the writer, and therefore it has its own kind of value. Thank you.